Greetings. My name is Robert Forristall, and my presentation will be on public key encryption. I will go over what public key encryption is, why it's important, and some of its implementations. So first things first, it's good to have a refresher of what encryption is. Encryption is just the process of converting some form of data or message into some form of concealed form through a reversible translation. This contains a few components: your unencrypted information, known as the plain text, your encrypted information, known as the ciphertext, your algorithm that will translate between the two, and then some sort of input or key to make the algorithm produce a unique output that can't be copied by some other random value. Why is encryption important? It's important to protect data. A lot of attackers nowadays are constantly attacking networks and systems, trying to get any information that they can, and any compromised data can lead to great harm for both the victim of the attack as well as other users if that attacker uses the compromised information to spread their ability to attack others. Some of the ways that they do this is through packet sniffing, trying to gain information and data during its transmission, impersonation as an authorized user to gain access to data that they shouldn't have access to, and then also the option of sending modified or fabricated information to servers or destinations in order to, again, gain access to some form of information or account that they don't have authorization to have. So to protect against these methods, encryption can be employed, and there are two main philosophies of encryption techniques. You have asymmetric encryption, which utilizes two keys, and symmetric encryption, which utilizes a single key. Symmetric encryption is the older and the more classical method of encryption, where one key is used for both encryption and decryption. This works great and does its job well. The primary issue, though, with it is the difficulty of exchanging keys. Since it's difficult for people to exchange keys online without meeting up in person and without the use of other cryptographic analysis or cryptographic algorithms that came into effect later on in the encryption life cycle. So that led to the introduction to asymmetric encryption, which introduced two keys, one for encrypting and one for decrypting, so that one key could be shared, the encryption key could be shared with others to allow for communication with the owner of the private key of the pair, while still protecting that information and ensuring that sharing that key won't compromise the entire crypto system. So this led to the idea of the public key encryption system. Public key encryption is an asymmetric encryption method. As mentioned before, it uses two keys. The encryption portion of the key pair is known as the public key and is meant to be shared with other users so that they can encrypt their messages for the desired recipient who owns the keys. And then the private key, the secret key, is known as the private key, which is used by the user to decrypt the messages that they receive from other users that are encrypted with their public key. This both ensures that the information is protected, but also ensures that the information that the recipient decrypts was in fact meant for them, since it was encrypted with their public key. So some other applications for public key crypto systems doesn't have to just encrypt information. They can be used in other manners too. You have something like the digital signature application, where the key pair is used simply as a validation of the sender's identity. The sender signs a portion of the message with their private key, and then the recipient can use that person's public key to verify that the message contents they got are non-fabricated or modified and came from the identified sender. And you also have the key exchange application, where an asymmetric key pair is used to create a shared secret symmetric key, which can then be safely shared between the two parties, thanks to the properties of the key exchange algorithms. So some implementations of this method of encryption, the most popular being the reverse Shamir-Adelman's, or RSA. This is a asymmetric block encryption algorithm, which encrypts blocks of data piece by piece. This contains three main portions: the key generation phase, which selects two large prime numbers, calculates the Euler totient from them, selects an additional random number between 1 and that Euler totient function, to then find its multiplicative inverse mod of the Euler totient function. Using these values of D, E, and N, you can generate a public and private key that can be applied to data through modular arithmetic to transform it and detransform it between plain text and ciphertext. So a short example of the RSA, we can see here the choosing of the random numbers, our two primes and our value of E, generation of N and the completion of our public key, the generation of D and the completion of our private key. Then you have the sender sending information. It is turned into numerical form, blocked into blocks that are less than this n value. It is then modded with you use bringing the exponent of the encryption portion and then modding it by n. You'll get these values. Transmitting these values, the sender can then decrypt using the decryption key, and you'll notice that the final resulting block values are the same as the initial found from the sender. So this is a quick demonstration of RSA in action with a simple message. So another very popular method of cryptography is the elliptic curve cryptography. This is primarily used for generating keys, but can be used for message encryption as well. It is used widely and very well liked due to its robustness and its ability to generate very powerful keys that are very difficult to guess based on the algorithm's own nature. Here we can see a representation of that being done in this short video. The two secret key values are chosen are 56 and 18, and then the elliptic arithmetic is performed. This is a finite field representation of the elliptic curve, which is sort of like a scatter plot representation, allowing for easy access to both elliptic addition and elliptic multiplication in order to perform these actions. So the first thing the two users did was they calculated out, after selecting their private key, they then calculated out their public key and shared it with the other party. And now after generating that public key, they can now generate their shared secret key by performing a elliptic multiplication between their private key and the public key provided to them by the other user. And as we can see, they end up with a same shared key of 17, 2. So two other important algorithms to mention besides the two most important are we have the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. This is probably the oldest and most classical form of public key cryptography. This is where two users generate their private and public key pairs. They then share their public keys with one another, and then using a modular arithmetic between the shared public key from the other party and their own private key that they own, they are then able to create a shared secret key, which is why this is represented as a key exchange algorithm. Note, outside of the other two, the RSA and the elliptic curve can be used for all applications of public key cryptography, encryption, digital signatures, and key exchange. Diffie-Hellman can only be used for key exchange. It cannot be used to directly encrypt or decrypt messages and cannot be used as a digital signature. And finally, we have the digital signature algorithm introduced by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. This is simply a digital signature method as given by the name. So it cannot encrypt messages and it cannot generate keys for key exchange. The idea behind this is simply for identifying the owner of messages. So you take the message itself, you take a random key and then a hashing function, and then using these information, you are able to generate a hashed signature that is then placed on concatenated to the message itself before it's sent. Once it's sent, the user can then verify using the owner's public key to verify that the sent message was not modified in some way or was not fabricated and sent by some unknown third party that's not authorized to communicate between these two. So with all these implementations introduced, there are still vulnerabilities to public key encryption as it is not perfect. The design of the cryptography of these systems must be always perfect. Any vulnerabilities in one component can lead to the entire system becoming compromised and leading to a lot of harm that could come to the victims of use these systems. You have the importance of randomness in key generation. Without a good random function, the key generation will not produce a key that is secure enough and strong enough to protect against many cryptanalysis methods. But true randomness is also very costly and expensive, so it's a difficult balance to find between the two. You have cryptanalysis attacks such as man-in-the-middle and timing attacks. With man-in-the-middle, you have an attacker who gets in the middle of a communication stream and tries to pass off their public key and the public key information as the other parties to trick the users into communicating with them rather than the intended destination. And then timing attacks, which try to guess the key length based on the time it takes to encrypt and decrypt information. You have lifetime of keys. Many public keys don't include good lifetime cycles and maybe stick around for too long, leading to brute force implementations being a possibility. And even something like a memory leak keys are usually saved in inside the RAM memory somewhere, and that could be accessible by a skilled attacker. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that this presentation helped to enlighten those about public key encryption and its methods to what can be improved and what can still be worked on. These are my primary resources for the majority of my content. And these are my resources for all of my graphics that I used. These resources were not used for any content, solely for their graphics, since they had very reliable and good graphics to use. Thank you very much for your time.